Picture this. You are stationed 80 meters beneath the Earth's surface. Complete darkness surrounds you. The air is stale and recycled. No signal reaches you from above. Between you and the open sky sits an enormous mass of solid rock and reinforced concrete that took military engineers the better part of a decade to construct. You are surrounded by ballistic missiles, solid rocket propellant, and military equipment valued at several $billion. And then, without any warning whatsoever, the entrance above you disappears, not damaged, not partially obstructed, completely and permanently sealed by a munition released from an aircraft that never appeared. On any radar screen targeting a mountain your commanding officers had repeatedly assured you was beyond the reach of any adversary on Earth. This is not a war game scenario. This is the documented reality experienced by an estimated 1,000 to 2,500 Iranian Revolutionary Guard personnel stationed at Iran's two largest subterranean missile installations on the night of March 2, 2026. And when you factor in the full scope of Iran's approximately 100 underground military installations distributed across the country, the magnitude of what took place that night represents something military historians are genuinely struggling to categorize. Approximately one-third of Iran's 96,000 strong armed forces, roughly 250,000 personnel, operate from facilities built beneath mountains and terrain. In a single sustained campaign, American forces methodically sealed the exits above virtually all of them, the tunnel networks Iran invested for decades and billions of dollars constructing as the ultimate guarantee of its national survival, had become the most consequential strategic miscalculation in the history of modern regional military powers. To fully grasp what collapsed, you must first appreciate what Iran actually built and the sheer ambition behind it. For 40 years, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps executed an extraordinary subterranean construction program beneath Iran's mountain ranges that had no comparable equivalent among regional military powers anywhere in the world. These were not simple bunkers or reinforced shelters. They were self-contained underground cities, fully functional military ecosystems carved directly into the hearts of mountain ranges, engineered to survive any attack imaginable from the surface above. The Imam Ali facility near Karamabad in Lorestan province, Iran's largest ballistic missile complex, contained a tunnel network stretching between 36 and 50 kilometers in total length. Inside that subterranean labyrinth sat hundreds of Shahab-3 variant ballistic missiles, concealed launch infrastructure, and ammunition. Stockpiles sufficient to sustain a prolonged regional conflict for years. The IRG formally referred to these installations as missile cities, and that terminology was not an exaggeration. The Tabriz complex in East Azerbaijan province extended even further, with tunnel corridors reaching 100 kilometers in total length, making it Iran's second largest underground arsenal. The regime had rebuilt it following damage sustained during operations in June 2025, because it always rebuilt, because the mountains Iran's leadership genuinely believed were permanent and untouchable. This entire military doctrine rested on one foundational assumption: that depth guaranteed survival. That assumption died on the night of March 2, 2026. What most mainstream coverage has consistently failed to capture is this: the destruction did not begin with a single bomb falling on a mountain. It began with silence. In the critical hours before the first American aircraft crossed into Iranian airspace, something fundamental happened to Iran's early warning radar architecture. Every screen went dark, not sequentially, not gradually, simultaneously. A precisely coordinated combination of offensive cyber operations and electronic warfare assets, deployed in perfect synchronization, reached deep into Iran's integrated air defense network and effectively blinded it completely. Radar operators stationed at facilities spread across the country watched their monitoring screens go blank and had absolutely no way of determining that the silence above them was already populated with incoming aircraft carrying weapons they had never previously encountered in any operational context. The thousands of personnel sealed hundreds of meters underground had no awareness whatsoever of what was unfolding on the surface above them. They could not observe it. They could not communicate about it. They continued routine operations as the window of their total strategic vulnerability opened silently above their mountain. That window remained open for 48 hours. The United States Air Force walked through it carrying the most devastating and systematically coordinated bombardment of underground military infrastructure ever recorded in the history of modern warfare. The operation executed against Karamabad and Tabriz was constructed around a layered destruction strategy that demonstrated a degree of combined arms coordination military analysts are still working to fully document. The opening phase belonged exclusively to the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, completely invisible to radar, moving through Iranian airspace without generating any detectable signature on whatever surviving detection systems remained operational below. The B-2S carried the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, a weapon weighing 30,000 pounds, measuring 6.2 meters in length, engineered to drive through 60 meters of reinforced concrete before its warhead activates. These weapons did not target the missiles stored inside the mountains. They targeted the architectural systems that made those mountains militarily functional primary tunnel entrance structures, critical load-bearing support columns, the entire structural framework holding the underground complex together when GBU-57 is impacted. The kinetic energy generated created seismic shock waves that propagated not just at the point of impact but throughout entire underground networks, producing irreparable structural fractures across kilometers of carved rock. The second phase deployed the B-1 Lancer at supersonic speed, systematically hunting mobile air defense batteries that had survived the initial electronic blinding and were attempting to reactivate. Every battery that raised a radar signature was identified and eliminated before establishing any targeting solution against incoming aircraft. The B-52 Stratofortress then arrived as a flying arsenal, delivering thousands of pounds of precision-guided munitions onto every surface target. The underground strikes had exposed ventilation systems, communication antennas, power transmission infrastructure, surface support buildings. Every connection between the underground complexes and the world above them was methodically and permanently severed. More than 8 primary tunnel entrances were rendered completely inoperable. NASA thermal satellite systems recorded extraordinary temperature spikes across target areas as chain reaction detonations of internal ammunition depots sent heat waves rising through solid rock to the surface. The mountains themselves appeared to burn from within. This was never a fair fight, and it was designed that way from the very beginning. The operational destruction extended far beyond Karamabad and Tabriz. Between March 21st and 23rd, American and Israeli forces executed a systematic targeting campaign against Iran's entire underground weapons production infrastructure simultaneously. The Damavand complex, positioned 50 kilometers east of Tehran, housing Iran's largest operational missile production laboratories, was struck by B-1 Lancer bombers and F-35 stealth jets on the night of March 22nd. Inside those tunnels sat mass production facilities for the Fateh-110 missile family, the Hajj-Kazem ballistic missile production line capable of striking targets 1,400 kilometers away, and warehouses containing hundreds of ready-to-launch missiles alongside thousands of tons of solid rocket propellant. But perhaps the single most strategically significant loss was something most people have never heard of: the planetary mixer. These massive industrial systems blend solid rocket fuel components into the homogeneous compound that powers ballistic missiles. Without them, solid fuel engine production stops entirely, because planetary mixers fall under strict international export controls. Iran cannot acquire replacements through legitimate channels. Every one destroyed represents a gap in Iran's production capability that cannot be quickly or easily filled regardless of financial resources available. The systematic dismantling continued across every remaining link in Iran's weapons production chain. The carbon fiber manufacturing facility in Kazran, critical for producing lightweight structural missile components, was completely destroyed between March 5th and 17th. The Qajir ballistic missile final assembly facility sustained heavy damage on March 7th, rendering its integration lines entirely inoperable. The Shad attack drone production facility in Isfahan was reduced from an active functioning factory on March 3rd to unrecognizable rubble by March 12th, 9 days. One complete production line permanently eliminated. Then came Isfahan itself, and the strategic stakes changed entirely. On the night of March 31st, American and Israeli forces struck the underground complex beneath Isfahan's mountains where, according to analysis published by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, Iran had relocated approximately 540 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity, sufficient material for 11 nuclear weapons. Over 40 heavy penetrating munitions were deployed in seconds. The estimated tonnage of bunker-busting ordnance dropped that single night ranged between 36 and 41 tons. Inside sealed tunnel systems, pressure waves from detonating warheads had nowhere to dissipate. They reverberated and amplified, triggering stored rocket fuel in chain reactions that multiplied each weapon's destructive effect exponentially. The mountains appeared to explode from within. The consequences revealed themselves immediately and measurably. Within 4 days of operations beginning, Iranian ballistic missile launches decreased by 86%. One-way attack drone launches dropped by 73%. Iranian President Pezeshkian appeared on state television and publicly apologized to neighboring countries attacked by Iranian forces, something no Iranian leader had ever done before. The hardliners called it treason. Parliament called it humiliation. Hours later, drones struck Dubai International Airport anyway. The civilian government had lost control of its own military. What was ultimately buried beneath those burning mountains was not merely hardware or stockpiles. It was an entire strategic doctrine for decades in the making, the foundational belief that sufficient depth guaranteed absolute survival. That belief is now sealed permanently beneath the same concrete it was built from, and every underground military power on Earth is quietly recalculating what that means for their own survival strategies going forward.